Gemini Spark is the most beginner-friendly AI agent out there, so if you've heard of Claude Cowork, Codex, or OpenClaw, but found those too intimidating, you are in the right place. In this video, we break down the 4 key capabilities of Gemini Spark, each with real-world use cases, so that by the end, you know exactly how and when to use Gemini Spark. Let's get started. First, let's quickly go over the differences between Gemini, the chatbot, and Gemini Spark. When it comes to file management, Gemini Chat can find and summarize files in our Google Drive, but it struggles with other basic tasks like renaming files and moving them to the correct folders. Gemini Spark, on the other hand, can detect whenever a new file is uploaded to a folder, rename it based on what's inside, and move it to the right location, which basically means your Google Drive is self-cleaning. Second, Gemini Chat can easily produce a well-written report in Google Docs, but you still have to ask for it every time. Gemini Spark can autonomously build that same report on a daily or weekly schedule. Third, although I can use the @Gmail command to triage my inbox and ask Gemini Chat to summarize my emails and prepare replies, it uses a different formatting every time and can't take basic actions like archiving emails or applying labels. With Gemini Spark, I have a triage workflow that runs on its own, formats each summary top-down the way I like it, proposes labels to add, and can archive irrelevant emails automatically. Put simply, Gemini Chat is more reactive. It answers when you ask for something. Gemini Spark is more proactive. It actually goes and does the work. Now, when Spark becomes available for you, there are 2 things you need to do. First, head on into Gemini settings, personal intelligence, and turn on memory. This lets Spark remember your preferences and learn how you work. And while we're here, go into connected apps and make sure the toggles for Google Workspace and search services are enabled. And by the way, you'll only see the personal intelligence option in your personal Google account. If you're using the enterprise version, you'll only see the connected apps tab. Click into it and just make sure the Google Workspace toggle is enabled, which gives Spark direct access to our Gmail, Google Calendar, and Google Drive. Second, head on into Google Drive and create a folder called Spark OS in the root of your My Drive, and you'll see how this comes into play later on. All right, capability number 1, connect the dots. Diving right into an example related to soccer. What was that? Soccer. Okay, example related to football. I tell Spark to create a spreadsheet of every match in this year's World Cup with the date and both teams. Then pull the transcript from my recent meeting with Elon Husky and Satya Nadella and add their predicted winners to the spreadsheet. Here's why this example is a great illustration of Spark's first capability. Create a spreadsheet tells it to make a Google sheet in my Google Drive. This year's World Cup means it has to search the web to find the full schedule. And pull the transcript from my recent meeting means it has to search my calendar and grab the meeting transcript. Then it stitches all of that into one spreadsheet without me opening a single app. This is the power of Spark's native integration within all our Google apps. This is a very silly analogy, but the easiest way to understand what Spark can do is to imagine the search bars from Google Drive, Google Calendar, Gmail, and Google Search all merged into one Omnibox with a virtual assistant behind that Omnibox who can take action on your behalf. Moving on to a work-related example, this time I tell Spark to review my latest email thread with Austin, then create a calendar invite for a quick catch-up on October 1st, in the same time slot as our last meeting. Let me review the title and description. And I'm just gonna let this run. Here's what's clever about this. I never said Austin's full name, but Spark knew to search my Gmail, find the right Austin, read the thread for context, check my calendar to reuse the time slot from our last meeting, and then draft the whole invite for my approval. And this is something you'll notice throughout the whole video. Gemini Spark pulling the right context from across my workspace and taking action on my behalf. If you're still typing all your prompts, by the way, I highly recommend using a voice-to-text tool like today's sponsor, Whisperflow, to become more effective with AI. So most people think these tools just save time, and while that's true, the real benefit is that you naturally give AI way more detail than you'd ever bother typing. And since context is the most important input, your output improves drastically. I've tried a lot of these tools, and Whisperflow is the fastest and most accurate one by far. For example, watch what happens when I ramble and make mistakes. I just hit a quick shortcut to start. 2 things. First, Gemini Spark is the advanced one. Wait, no. The beginner one. And second, Codex is the advanced one. Hit the shortcut again. And boom, as you can see, Whisperflow cleaned up my mistakes and formatted everything for me. And if I bring up my Whisperflow dashboard, you'll see that I've been using this regularly since December of last year. 87% of my usage has been for AI prompts. And not to brag, but ever since I added the top 2% ranking here to my dating profile, I've been getting matches like crazy. Anyway, click the link below for a free month of the Pro plan. Thank you, Whisperflow, for sponsoring this video. Moving on to capability number 2, follow your templates. Going back to the Spark OS folder I asked you to create, add another folder inside called Spark Templates. Create an empty Google Doc, and I'll paste in a weekly report template I built ahead of time, and I'll name this weekly report template. I'll leave a link to all these templates down below. Then back in Gemini Spark, I'm going to attach an intake document where the sales teams have added their long and very messy updates. And I just say, I just received this week's updates from the sales teams. Turn them into a leadership brief that follows the weekly report template from the Spark templates folder. And we're just gonna send this off. And after a few minutes, you can see that Spark has pulled all the raw updates from the intake document and distilled the key details into a clean leadership brief. The bigger takeaway here is to find the work you do over and over, build a template for it once, and just point Spark at the template, and it produces a consistent deliverable every time without you having to re-explain anything. By the way, at the end of the video, I'll show you how to teach Gemini Spark to follow your preferences for any work that you do, not just matching the format on one deliverable. All right, capability number 3, create repeating playbooks using the skills feature. So just now, we saw Spark transform messy notes into a structured brief using a template. We can now take this a step further by first going into our Spark OS folder and creating another 99_temp folder. Then in the same chat that produced the report, I can tell Spark, create a weekly report skill that finds the latest data entry in my weekly report intake doc and rewrite it to match the weekly report template in the Spark templates folder. And always save the output in the 99_temp folder. Before you save the skill, restate my goal and show me the steps so I can approve them first. And let me send this off and we'll see what happens. Spark's going to first repeat its understanding of my goal, then propose a plan for me to review. And after I approve it, Spark's going to create a weekly report skill that shows up under the skills tab on the left. And so the next time the sales team updates the intake document, I can just open up a new chat, type / and pick the skill to generate a new report that follows the same structure without me having to explain all the steps. As you can see, a skill is basically a fixed set of instructions that turns the same kind of input into the same kind of output, where only the content changes. Think of a waffle iron. Whatever batter you pour in, normal or chocolate, you get the same waffle out. I mean, chocolate is obviously better, but you get my point. Your input is the batter, the skill is the iron, and the output is the waffle. Taking this further still, let's say I want to make an edit to the skill. I can just say something like, edit the weekly report generator skill so that it shows the bottom line in chat for me to review. And after a minute or two, Spark is just going to go ahead and update the skill directly. Now that you understand how skills work, I'll link my exact Inbox Zero skill down below in the description for you to download. And after you download it, you can just double click to unzip it to get the skill.md file, go back into your Gemini Spark, go to skills, click upload skill, and just drag the skill.md in. And after a couple of seconds here, it's gonna upload successfully. And we're gonna click create to confirm. Now, when you run that skill, you'll notice that it follows my preferences when it comes to formatting and labels. And that's by design, because the fastest way for you to learn is to tailor an existing skill to fit your workflow. So go ahead and just start playing around with it. Pro tip, if you created your own skill and wanna share it with a teammate, just go to the 3 dots, download, and they will just upload the skill in the exact same way. By the way, if you want to boost your Google Workspace productivity by 1% every week, you can sign up for my weekly newsletter to receive a bite-sized tip you can apply in under 60 seconds. Link down below. Next, capability number 4, automating your routines with scheduled tasks. In a nutshell, a skill still requires you to explicitly run it, while a scheduled task runs on its own, either at a set time, a time-based trigger, or when something happens, an event-based trigger. Going back to our weekly report workflow, since the sales team always updates the intake document by Friday afternoon every week, it makes sense to create a scheduled task around this. So I tell Spark, create a scheduled task that runs the weekly report skill every Monday at 9:30 a.m. And we're gonna send this off and see what happens. Once Spark confirms the weekly task has been created, we can head on over to the schedules tab on the left to check that yes, this is a time-based schedule task running the weekly report skill every Monday at 9:30 a.m. And we can even test it out right now by clicking the 3 dots and hitting run. Moving on to an event-based example, since I use Gemini for note-taking, I receive an auto-generated meeting transcript from Gemini-notes@google.com after every meeting. And so I can tell Spark, whenever I receive an email from Gemini-notes@google.com, analyze the meeting transcript in full, brief me using the bottom line upfront format, and draft a recap email to the attendees if one's warranted. And Spark will then build an event trigger scheduled task. Once that's done, Spark will now just silently sit there watching for that transcript email. And the moment it lands, it reads the notes, briefs me on the decisions and action items, and drafts the recap. Pro tip, event triggers like this one are created by talking to Gemini directly and not through the manual schedule builder, which only does time-based schedules for now. At this point, you might be curious how Gemini Spark stacks up to its peers. First, I'm going to oversimplify a bit, but Gemini Spark is definitely the most beginner-friendly option since it's already embedded in the tools you already use, like Gmail, Google Calendar, and Google Drive. So it requires the least amount of setup. Furthermore, and this is a massive advantage, unlike all the other systems, Gemini Spark runs completely on the cloud, meaning these scheduled tasks, well, I guess all tasks in Gemini Spark, can fire when my laptop is off, which is not possible in Claude Cowork, Claude Code, and Codex. On the flip side, if you open the connected apps page, you'll see that there aren't that many external tools Spark can plug into yet, which is a real weakness since an agent's whole job is taking action for you in the tools that you use. I mean, just compare the lack of options here with all these options in Claude as an example. And there's one more issue to bring up. Sorry, Google, I love you guys, but I have to be fair here. Since we can't pick the model that Spark uses, I found the output is sometimes inconsistent. But this should be a fairly easy fix. Just let us pick the model. Next, Claude Cowork is the intermediate option since it's friendly towards non-technical users, but still gives us a lot of control. For example, my Cowork system contains this memory.md document, so I can explicitly control what Cowork knows about me. For example, instead of being an assistant to the office manager, I can be the assistant office manager. Gemini Spark, however, is a black box in that if you ask, hey, where can I see all the information you know about me? It gives you a vague, unhelpful answer, and you just have to trust it's remembering the right things about you. Claude Code and Codex are the most powerful by far, but to get the most out of these two tools, you would need to have a technical/coding background. No matter which one you pick though, all these agents only work as well as your workspace architecture, aka how your files and folders are organized. For instance, my entire Cowork system lives in just one folder, organized by the different areas of my life. And this allows me to quickly load the relevant context, and therefore Cowork gives me better answers and uses far fewer tokens. If you want to learn more about my Cowork system, I'll leave a link to my free Cowork toolkit down below. Once you get comfortable with Gemini Spark, here's how you can start building a system. Start a new chat and say, create a Google Doc called spark.md in my Spark OS folder to store all my Spark workspace rules. Add 2 rules for now. A communication rule to always lead with the bottom line up front, followed by supporting details, and a file rule to save every file you generate to my 99 temp folder by default. And a minute later, the doc shows up in my Spark OS folder with those 2 rules written in. Now watch what I can do. I tell Spark, compare Google's AI strategy against Microsoft's, and read spark.md before responding. And after a minute or so, the answer comes back bottom line up first because Spark followed the rules from the spark.md document. I'm going to stop here to avoid overwhelming you, but the broader principle is if you don't want to rely on Spark's black box memory, you can force it to follow your preferences every time by pointing it at a file you control, which is exactly how Claude Cowork, Claude Code, and Codex work. Although we can't force Spark to read the spark.md document automatically just yet, I have a feeling it's coming based on my interview with Josh Woodward, who's head of Gemini at Google. And the way you described Gemini Spark is it sort of works automatic in the background. People don't really need to touch it.
Yeah.
Is there going to be an option for power users to inject their own sort of control for Gemini Spark over the long term?
Absolutely. So we're kind of figuring out the right way to present all that, but definitely imagine you're going to be able to customize both on the more kind of traditional MD side as well as the skill side.
If you found this helpful, you might want to check out my AI playlist next. See you on the next video. In the meantime, have a great one.